Hey y'all, welcome to episode 36 of the Stay at Home Son podcast. And today we have a very special episode. Today we are going to be talking to Danny of Desert Cactus Film, and he had a really cool short film called Margaret the Brave. We really enjoyed this film. I guess the first question I want to ask is what inspired the film? And also, do you have like a folklore mythology background? Because you really knew your stuff.
Oh, well, thank you. No, I don't really have a background in mythology, but I figured it'd be a good, career for this character, since I was going to kind of be making one up from scratch. And I tried to not be too specific on things, so he doesn't give you like a specific place where this fairy tale, is set or anything like that. But I just wanted to, I am interested in the hero's journey and, the monomythic structure, Joseph Campbell's work. So I was really just trying to make something that could fit in that mold. And obviously, there's tons of examples of that. Obviously, Star Wars and Harry Potter, and the list just goes on and on. But
I
um,
honestly didn't expect Star Wars and Harry Potter to be your inspiration. Like I thought like that story that he was telling was like very like King Arthur or like very like Shakespearean kind of
oh,
like
oh yeah. Well, in terms of just like movies that I adore, a big one is John Borman's Excalibur from 1981. That is probably like if I had to give a letterbox top four, that'd be in there. And that was a big one that inspired me for this. And then obviously the Adventures of Robin Hood, because not to give too much away about the film, but Robin Hood does play a part in it as well. So.
Gotcha. And I think what really made the film enjoyable for me was just how passionate the lead actor seemed in the role. He did a really good job with that passion. It really made me, I really thought he was really into mythology, like in the real world. I was like, no way this guy's super into it. He's just so into the subject matter and this great story. And it has such a sweet message at the end. And I feel like, casting for something like this can be a little difficult at times, making sure you get someone with that passion. So how was casting for this short film? And did y'all click off right away or did it take a while to find that person?
Yeah, no, I really lucked out. We met Roberto Rad at this event that he did called Rad Time, which was sort of like an improv comedy variety show that he put on. And this was like late 2019 when I was writing the script. So pretty much after we saw him, and it's funny, he came out like in drag, like he was dressed in like fishnets and heels, like he looked like Dr. Frankenfurter from the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah, I love that movie, by the way.
Yeah. So that's how we were introduced to this guy who ended up playing like the wholesome dad character in our film. But he comes from an improv comedy background, so it I don't know, it just seemed like he could handle this material and he could bring something new to it. I think if you're playing a storyteller in any way, you need to be able to come up with stuff on the fly, and he definitely was able to do that. So we were really lucky to be able to write it for him and then have him, read for it and be totally into it and get on board. So.
So did you take a mythology class in like university or anything? Just because like I found it funny in the beginning scene where like everybody's kind of bored because like I personally found his lecture like very engaging.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I don't know. I come from a family of teachers, so I felt like I was kind of writing what I know. I don't imagine that they would be that bored. Honestly, if they're anything like me, I'd be very interested in that lesson. But yeah, that was actually an added scene. Originally, the film didn't have that opening scene in the classroom. It started with him on the phone at the house, and we realized you kind of needed it. You needed to see him, in his role as a teacher to understand when he's telling the story why he is this way, and why he is so passionate about it. So I'm so glad that we kind of tested it with different people here in the film community and said, how do you feel like what's not working for you? And it kept coming back to that where it felt like there wasn't enough context. So even though the film is 27 minutes long, I don't regret at all putting that extra scene at the beginning there. So.
Yeah, and one thing I really liked about it, and it really took me by surprise just how well done it was the actual scenes with when they were talking about the story. The night scene, the mythology scene. How did y'all go about doing that? Was that like CGI? Was that practical effects? Like it was really stunning. I kept rewatching it, like, how'd they figure this out?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a mix of a lot of different techniques, miniatures, matte paintings, stop motion puppets. Yeah, we were filming it really like in the middle of COVID. Like it was the summer, or I guess fall of 2020 was when we started doing our green screen stuff. So obviously we're having to be very precautious and follow all the guidelines, having everybody tested and trying to do social distancing. But it kind of helped because we were on a smaller green screen to begin with, so we couldn't have that many people in the studio at one time. That did create, and this is kind of regardless of COVID or not, it did create this issue where if I wanted to do a big crowd in a scene, I had to shoot that crowd like 3 or 4 people at a time, and then take the green screen footage of that, small group, and then just paste it, with footage of other people that had been shot in smaller groups. So it took a lot of time to just composite all of these things. But that's why it kind of has that feeling of like a pop-up book, because so much of it is really just, two-dimensional layers just stacked on top of each other. So.
So personally, I loved the sword fighting action scene when he's telling the story of Margaret the Brave, how she stands up to the king. So just talk about some of the choreography of that.
Ah, yes. Well, that one is definitely an homage to Adventures of Robin Hood. That's basically the scene where Errol Flynn tells Prince John, like, you're not my king. And the choreography for that, I think originally we had her. She was fighting with one of the staffs, that the guards carry around. But we were like, no, she needs to have a sword fight. We couldn't quite do fencing, and also that probably wouldn't have read very well on a green screen. So we went with our foam swords that we had. And there's a local stunt team called the Our Hat Orphan Brotherhood, and they are awesome. They do a lot of cool stunt choreography and fight scenes. And so we went to them. We did rehearsals at their dojo. First we kind of got the guys who were playing our guards together, and they learned their moves. They learned the basics of choreography, and then we had our actress Callie Maxon, who plays Margaret. She came in and learned her parts, and yeah, that was probably about, I would say, maybe 1 or 2 days of shooting. But of course, then we also had to shoot all the people in the room that weren't there. So maybe in total it was like, it might have been at least 4 or 5 days of shooting just to get all the elements that we needed for that scene.
And then I gotta ask you, I'm shocked Jake hasn't asked about it. The music, I absolutely loved it. I am a sucker for orchestral music. Like sometimes I'll just sit at like 3 in the morning listening to, I don't know if you ever heard like that NPR hour, or like they'll just play like orchestral music. So,
Oh, he
Yeah.
will too. He will too. Because I remember we were taking the bus in college, and I would hear that coming out of his headphones. Like, what are you listening to, man?
Oh yeah. Every morning I got the classical station on. That's like how I start my day. Yeah, I was really passionate about using, some very well-known classical pieces in this, and obviously they're older, so they're in the public domain, but the recordings of them aren't necessarily. So there was, a lot of, trying to figure out how we were gonna not do the whole thing with pre-existing, recordings of classical pieces and kind of marry those pieces together with an original score. So we had composer Jesse Oakley Nelson out of LA. She came on board and basically was like, what do you need here? She's done Star Wars. She's done, some really cool properties. And we wanted her to bring that kind of timeless feel to this. So the big task was like, hey, we have like Tchaikovsky and we have Strauss and we have Wagner, all this different stuff. And we need pieces that can kind of stitch them all together, and especially like when we're in reality, because a lot of that stuff is going to have to be original music. So she really stepped up to the plate. And yeah, I love the score that she gave us. And we just actually released that. So now that's out there.
Well, and I really thought it did fit the film very well, having that score. And I think one thing I want to say about the film too is, it's not just an action film, it's not just a mythology film. It's really a really sweet film about a father trying to explain the divorce and basically trying to understand his daughter a little bit. So was that like a heavy subject for y'all to do? Did y'all want to handle that lightly? Because it was really sweet at the end. It kind of crept up on me a little bit emotionally at the end. He's like, wow, what a sweet resolve right there. Because I see a lot of films about like broken homes and stuff. But this film handled it with such grace and in such like a light way, like such a human type way, and it was just really sweet. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to acknowledge that they are going through a separation, as a family, but I didn't really want it to be the whole focus of the ending because obviously there's more going on with Caroline than just the fact that her parents are splitting. There's just the weight of the world, that she feels like she has on her shoulders, and just the dread about the future that I think a lot of young people might be dealing with. So that was kind of more what I was writing to, is like what would be the ultimate pep talk that you would give to a young person coming up in the world as it is now. So that's why, and I wrote it to that Tchaikovsky piece. So it was like a non-negotiable that we had to have that in there. And the big thing was, that song. It has highs and lows. It has its softer moments, and then it has that big sort of, the horns come in and that big sort of dramatic finale. And I was like, well, okay, so how do we navigate this? How do we have the dad kind of flow with this piece of music, but not come off as overbearing? So I hopefully it doesn't seem like he's too manic, though he is going through. Obviously, he's going through some real mental anguish. There's another thing too that actually didn't make the final cut because I was trying to allude to the state of the world and I guess like climate change and I don't know, just big lofty ideas. There was a bit in the living room at the beginning that we basically just cut for time where Caroline is watching the news. She's just sitting there, like taking in all the horrible things that are happening in the world. And I think it still works without it. But it was, yeah, it was sort of trying to address not just the immediate world of her life, but the world that she's going to be going out into. Obviously, she's starting her hero's journey. So.
Yeah, it was just really well done, really well thought out and put together. I had this saying one time. They talked about try to put the universe in like a jar of water or something instead of writing a whole thing about the universe. And I think you did a good job on that because it's about divorce and it's about her feelings of it, but all in all, it really just goes about that change and how it feels, being a young adult with all the uncertainty and stuff. And it showed her dad seemed like someone who also he didn't come across overbearing because it didn't seem like he was like, oh, I have all the answers. It just seemed like he was very caring and just wanted to help and make sure his daughter felt loved. So it was just really sweet.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad that it worked.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was well thought out from the start to the finish to the end. And the last question I have for you, last two really, is what was the hardest day on set? I always like to ask filmmakers. Was there one day that was like, wow, we were gonna need like 20, 30 takes of this?
I mean, honestly, I think the first day was probably the hardest, and that might be the case. That might typically be the case. But I remember we started the very first day with that tracking shot along his dresser, and you're like seeing, some of the photos that are sitting out there, and you're seeing some of the graded papers and things like that. So we set dressed that, really put a lot of thought into it, and then when it came to, time to shoot, we were really having trouble with just getting the timing right because it's such a precise sort of tracking shot. So you'll see in the final film, like it cuts away from that. We kind of saved ourselves a bit of a headache because there was also the trouble of having to rack focus to the divorce papers at the end of that tracking shot. So we ended up doing, I swear, 40 takes of that shot, the very first setup of the first day. And I realized very quickly, okay, I'm gonna have to change up my game plan here. I cannot be so precious with the camera work, and I'm just gonna have to do I'm gonna just have to go with the flow and get these shots in a way that just works, so that it doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to get the point across. So the first day was definitely the hardest, and then I remember um, Caroline didn't originally have glasses, the daughter character. So we were shooting her at the end of the first day in her bedroom without glasses, and it wasn't looking right. It wasn't working. And so we we were like, when we got there the second day, we're like, I told my DP Ryan, I was like, I'm so sorry. I think we're gonna have to reshoot some stuff from yesterday. And I could just see his spirit sink. And so it was a rough start. It was obviously there was a lot of like growing pains for me and adjustments to working with a bigger crew. But by the end of it, we were really hitting a flow state, you might say. So yeah. But the first day, I think was definitely the hardest.
Gotcha. Yeah, I always like asking that question because I always like to rewatch the films after we review them. And when I know that after I've talked to the filmmaker, I kind of will rewatch it like, wow, that was what took so long. That's the hard part. It's kind of just gives me a different way to look at it. Makes it more enjoyable even on the second run around. So
Thank you.
thanks for answering that. And what's the future for Desert Cactus Film and what's the future for Margaret the Brave? Where do you want to see this film go?
Margaret the Brave is going to be going to YouTube in September. We're kind of wrapping up our festival run now. We've been going for about a year and a half. And yeah, we're ready to move on to the next thing. I had a script for a feature that I was working on maybe the last like year or so, and I kind of got to a point where I think I'm gonna have to set it aside. It's a really big, ambitious project. I don't know if it's the right thing to do immediately after Margaret. So I've actually been writing a new short the past month or so, and it's much more doable.
Yeah,
You know, sometimes your eyes are bigger than your stomach. Um,
especially with filmmaking.
yeah, well, and that's what happened before Margaret too. In the summer of 2019, we wrote an entire feature and got to the end of it, and we're like, yeah, okay, you know, we like this script, but we can't make it right now. So that's why we wrote Margaret. And we're kind of in the same boat again. So it's like, and the feature that we were writing this summer was kind of a carryover from that past script. So it's like this is a story that I think just keeps getting carried on,
Yeah,
passed on, you know, pushed down the road. So we'll get to that eventually. But yeah, no, I'm very excited about this next short. I'm gonna finally be doing a Western, which is something
nice.
I've always wanted to do. So yeah, we're hoping to be shooting that hopefully in the spring.
Desert Cactus Films making a Western film just sounds perfect. It sounds perfect. I love it.
Thank
Well,
you.
Danny, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. We really enjoyed the film. I'm just wishing it all the success, and I'm wishing all the success with you. It's one of the better short films we've actually reviewed on the show. So we'll definitely be shouting you out. We're looking forward to seeing where you progress with your career, man.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, of course. Y'all have a wonderful day. Thank y'all for watching. And remember, stay at home.